We have had actually even more of a debate than the organizers expected. So I think it would be nice now to give the authors, each of the panelists, a brief chance to respond to the others. So I'm going to give you each exactly 2 minutes to respond to each other, exactly 2 minutes each. And then we'll open it up to the audience.
Can you hear me? Great. I really appreciate Stewart coming, and especially your focus on pragmatism and on casting aside the sort of bickering. I really want to do that too. I want to take issue with a couple of things that you said. Don't confuse PR with academic statements, absolutely, but the reports this project issues have the name of Columbia University stamped on the front. It's an institution I revere. My dad used to be a professor there. And Jeffrey Sachs says in The Guardian that all of their evaluation statements are backed by peer-reviewed science. So if people are getting that impression, it's not because they are making a mistake. It's something that is actively encouraged by the project. Peer-reviewed articles being in the hopper, this is something we heard at the time that we issued our paper in October 2010, that peer-reviewed science was on the way. The article they have promoted most came out in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition last fall, in which they asserted, a year after we sent them our findings showing that child malnutrition had been declining across the regions where they're working, they asserted that it hadn't been changing. And we protested to the editors of the journal, and in the current issue this month is our letter showing that in fact that's false, and a response from the authors admitting that it's false. The peer-reviewed science that they're issuing deserves some skepticism. I just want to point that out. I want to talk more about this with you, about this issue of funders aren't interested in causality, that they're interested you said you're not so interested in clearly establishing causal relationships. To me, it's the thing that funders should be interested in establishing. As for the cost of evaluation, the data that we used to compare what's going on in the regions to what's going on in the villages are DHS data. They're freely available on the web. Anybody could have done that in 3 days at no cost. They just didn't want to do it. And that's the problem. We're not talking about huge, expensive, randomized trials. Thanks for the chance to discuss.
Sure.
Okay. Stewart?
Very quickly. I do believe that the science is good science. I think there is a difference of opinion in what's being represented. You know, I look forward, as do you, to their next article. I'm speaking from the perspective of a funder, and there's a very important point I want to make. Everybody keeps talking about this as being donor aid. Millennium Villages, while it does have some public money in it, is predominantly private aid. It is foundations, it's rich guys writing checks. This is predominantly not government money. Now, there is some government money, but I think Millennium Villages spent $100 million last year. I don't remember exactly what. Of that, you know, I know at least 70 was private aid. So, you know, this is not money that's going to be given to someone. That is an allocation to a public good. The second point I want to make on Bernadette's data is I agree with her, violently agree with her on certain points. If you don't get farmers up the value chain, they may well be worse off when the subsidized fertilizer disappears, which is why it's so important to me to get them up the value chain, why it's so important to me to, for example, go from solely producing maize to producing a mixture of maize and higher value pulses or higher value herbs. In terms of the co-ops, the questions you raise are good questions. The co-ops have been around for all of 2 months, as far as I know. We just don't know how they're going to work. We are, as I said, tinkering, and we welcome all of the tinkering we can find. The last point I want to, and I do agree that we do care about causality, but it's equally important to me that you look at this as a system and that you not necessarily try to disaggregate each piece, because the dynamics of systems and the lack of certainty about dynamic systems becomes exceedingly complex. And I think saying this piece of agriculture works, this piece of health works, without looking at them on a systems basis is a significant mistake. The last point I would throw out, and perhaps it's a discussion that you all ought to continue, is okay, this isn't perfect. I haven't heard anybody else sitting here propose anything to do other than to evaluate. So what's your plan?
Okay, thank you. I think I totally agree with you. The first point is to ask ourselves whether it works or not. Then maybe from there try to come up with ways of improving the system. We can't say that everything is wrong. We can't throw it out. I think what is there is to try and improve what is there and see how we can be able to meet the goals. Yeah.